In the last section, we spoke about cleaning up after ourselves by using the middleware system in Mongoose. We can attach some number of functions to run right before or after some given event. The 4 events that we can possibly watch for inside of Mongoose are init, which is called for initialization of a model, validate, which is called whenever a record is validated, save, which as you might guess is whenever a record is about to save, and remove, which is by far most useful one for us. So we can define middleware to run right before or after each one of those events. So let's add a middleware to run right before the remove event on a user. And inside of that middleware that we're going to define, we'll make sure that we clean up all the associated blog posts with that user. All right, so I'm going to open up my user.js file. Typically, we will locate all of our middleware that is associated with a single model inside of the related user file, or excuse me, model file. Do note that all the different models that we have can have their own sets of middleware. So the middleware that we're about to add is tied 100% just to a user. So we're going to look at our user schema, and we're going to say pre-save. So that's pretty much it. That's like the magic for adding a middleware. Watch for the save event, and pre, or before that occurs, run some function. So we'll define a function. It'll be passed in as a second argument. So this right here is what's going to be called right before any record gets saved, or I should say before any user specifically gets saved. Now, of course, I made a little bit of a mistake already. I keep on saying pre-save because pre-save is one of the most common middleware that we write, but we don't want to watch for the save event. We want to watch for the remove event. So totally my mistake there. Do notice that we passed in, again, a keyword function as opposed to a fat arrow function. That, again, just like with our virtual fields up here, is because the model instance is available as this. So I'm going to put a little comment in here. I'm going to say basically this is basically equal to Joe. Okay, so just remember that. This is not, of course, always going to be exactly equal to Joe. This is just like a nice little comment between you and me to remember that, you know, this very colloquial user that we have of Joe is what this is going to be. You get the idea. So now inside of here, we can do some amount of cleanup on all of our different blog posts. But this definitely starts to open up a little bit of a can of worms. Like ideally, we would say just blog post dot remove and something, 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 right? That's what we want to do. But this really starts to open up a can of worms, and here's why. If I make a direct reference to blog post right here, that implies that I am going to go up to the top of my file and require in blog post at the top. Now I can definitely do that right now, but here's where the problem is. If I later go into my blog post file and decide to write some middleware inside of here that needs to require the user model, I would then need to say up here, const user equals require user. So now I would be in a type of situation where I have a cyclical load between my user file and my blog post file. The user file requires blog post, but blog post requires user. So which one actually gets loaded up first? It's best to just completely avoid this type of situation. I'm going to remove this require in blog post, by the way. That was just a for example. It's best to just completely avoid this situation by using Mongoose as a little bit of a helper. At the very bottom of my user file, remember how we registered our user model using mongoose.model? We can use this exact same function right here to pull another model out of Mongoose that has already been registered. So long story short, I'm going to say const blog post equals mongoose.model blog post, like so. So when I do this, you might be thinking, well, Stephen, don't we still have like a cyclical load here? Or, cyclical, I feel like is not the right term. They both require each other. That's what I'm trying to say here. When we write the code like this, however, the mongoose.model call will not be invoked until this function actually runs, which in theory is way down the line, way past our application first loading up. So if we ever want to have to not worry about this cyclical kind of loading situation, we can just use mongoose.model and we will always be a-okay because this is going to return the entire blog post model. Okay, so now we're inside this file. We've got access to our blog post model. And now we can call remove on this and figure out how we're going to remove all the records in blog post that are associated with Joe. So let's take a quick break and figure out exactly how we're going to do that in the next section.